I went from zero to where I could be raising almost $50 million in capital in the next 6 months.
Holy Moses.
I'm watching the speed of things right now, and I've never seen the speed of industries changing so fast.
I'll add, I think that we may see an adoption of private currencies over the next 4 to 5 years.
I'm going to make a bold prediction. We will have, it's coming, and it makes so much sense.
That's
bold.
a really interesting thought.
Ryan, it is great to be back. We have not chatted for a while, and I knew that you said, let's talk after the election. There's just a lot going on. I'd rather wait till after the election. And here we are, the day after the election, sitting down and talking. How cool.
Well, I remember being with you 2 years ago recording an episode and feeling really pessimistic about the state of the world.
Yeah.
Because we had peers who were preparing for civil war.
Yeah.
And we knew that we wanted to be optimistic when it came down to have our next conversation. And if we were talking about the upcoming election, then, you know, depending on which way it went, some people might be optimistic, some people might be pessimistic. And so I wanted to talk about what it looks like for us to craft out intentionally an optimistic future for the next 4 years, the next 8 years, the next 12 years.
Yeah. And it's funny, Ryan, because you and I have done a role reversal here, because I would say 2 years ago, I was saying, Ryan, don't get so caught up in all this stuff. And as you know, Ryan, I was going to cancel this episode today just because I'm like, I'm a little hungover from last night. You're
not feeling so optimistic.
Yeah, I'm not feeling so optimistic right now. And so we're having a little bit of a role reversal here. I'm a little bit hungover from 2 years of nervous system attacks, negative campaigning on both sides. I'm just kind of like, hungover is a really good word to describe it. So we are in an opposite place. One thing I do want to acknowledge you for, Ryan, is that you know, you've been coming out with text, and I think your messages on email have been so good. And I'm not seeing them
My
elsewhere.
newsletter copy?
Your newsletter copy has been great. Like, what you've been saying the whole time is, remember, don't get so caught up in the fray of what you're hearing today. Like, look at the bigger picture. You will be here in 4 years from now. Your company will be here, and the opportunities to grow will be here. Like, and it's always a good reminder, because we get so caught up in these things that we can't control. And I think what you're reminding us is that, like, hey, focus on the good things, and there's so much here you can control, and we have such rich soil, so don't get too hungover by the elections. Is that a fair way to, I mean, you've been saying it differently.
Yeah, well, JP, I gave a, thank you, by the way.
Yeah.
I gave a keynote talk at a GoBundance event a few weeks ago. And as I was doing some research for my presentation, there was something that I found that really just clicked in my brain. And I showed this chart of the S&P 500 index since 1950, and it's up 100x. And if you look at this chart, there's this flat line, flat line, flat line, flat line, and then exponential curve up over the last 20 years.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you run the numbers, it's 100x return in the S&P 500, this amazing run. And I asked the question, hey, let's, what was going on in this flat area? There's 30 years of flat, 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 and then boom. So what were these people doing for 30 years? So I reran the numbers from 1950 to 1985, which was what that flat part of the graph was. And I turned it to another graph. It's another exponential curve up.
Interesting.
So it again looks flat, 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 boom. And so it made me go, okay, is there a chance that we think we're in the exponential curve right now, but we're actually in the flat part?
Interesting.
Right now. So then that made me look at something else. I was preparing my slides right around the time of the debate, and the debate between Trump and Harris. And the moderator asked Kamala Harris about the last 4 years and if the average American was better off now than 4 years ago. And she gave some canned response about the middle class, and, you know, she didn't answer the question.
I remember.
And I just thought, what a shame, because that was such a layup of a question.
You're right.
Does anyone remember 4 years ago with masks and vaccines and race riots and looting and, you know, just paying people to stay at home? And do you remember what was happening in 2020?
That's a really good point.
And just to not be not to be partisan, I went and then looked at, okay, the 4 years of Trump. So what has happened in 8 years? One term of Trump, 1 year of Democratic control. So the world from 2016 to now, and the S&P 500 is up 3x. GDP is up 50%. We've added 500 million people to the world. We made innovations in AI. And all of a sudden, I just saw a different story. I started to see, okay, let's zoom out. It almost doesn't matter who wins. It doesn't matter if there's a pandemic for 2 years. It doesn't matter if there's 2 recessions, which we've had in the last 8 years. Over time, things expand, and it just reframed things for me. And I've tried to be louder about that, because the more pessimistic I am, the more closed I am, the less I feel like I have to give, the more I feel like I have to contribute, the less that I am going to invest in that project, the less happy I'm going to be, the less loving I'm going to be. And so I have just found that betting on an optimistic future has very little downside.
It's interesting. I think at this point, I march on normally, and economically, I really am very bullish about America. Like, I really am. And my industry, real estate, like I remain bullish. I don't know if this is the father in me. I think about your kids and my kids. I think about just making sure that we leave the right legacy for the next generation. And maybe I'm worrying too much. Maybe that's the dad in me. That's like, we've had it so good. Like, look, if things changed in 5 years from now, it was a very different world. I've had a hell of a run. Like, I've been able to play the American dream, and it's a really amazing dream. And I'm really just not, concerned's the wrong word. I care. I deeply care and hope we can give that gift to the future generations. And I'm not saying we're not going to, but when I hear so many people on both sides of the party, by the way, that don't believe, I mean, fundamentally, there's a disbelief in our government, or a lack of trust. And maybe rightfully so, maybe rightfully not so, quite frankly. Part of it's just that we've shown the spotlight. I'm sure this stuff's been going on for years. It's just now we look at everything. But I think the fatherly part of me, that's just the concerning part, is that if you don't trust your government, what do you have? If you don't trust your agencies, I'm not saying that agencies shouldn't be reformed, and I'm not saying we can't do better. We definitely can, but just be careful, because if you don't trust if you can't trust a single story, and we can't agree that this pillow is blue, and we're going to argue over if this pillow is blue or not, that's the part where it gets me concerned. Just getting back to some point of, like, we establish a news source, a new kind of news source, or a source of information that people can somewhat agree is, like, factually checked. There's no emotion, playing by rules, and having leaders that play by certain rules, so that we give ourselves, our businesses, and the world confidence that's part of what America is, I think, is really important. I'm not saying we're going to lose it, but that's what I hold on to.
When I go to raise capital for a company, and I give you a call, and I say that the company is raising capital at a $5 million valuation, how did I come up with that $5 million valuation? It's a story. Right. And I have different facts that factor into that story.
Correct.
But ultimately, what determines if that is worth $5 million is if you, as the investor, believe this story and the facts behind the story, and you have the confidence to be able to send a wire in order to make that valuation real. And then I may call someone else and say, we're already raising capital at this valuation. Now there's social proof. It gives credence to the story that I am telling. Right. And oftentimes, I think when we feel uncertain, we cling to the story that is what we've all agreed on in the past, which is this pillow is blue. And what I think we are seeing now is that we all can create whatever story we want and find facts to back it up, whether they're true or not, or made up on a clickbait site somewhere that has no basis in reality. And when we can't trust the government to create our stories for us, I think there's more responsibility for us to consciously control the stories that play out in our lives. And so what I see right now, and I kind of had just made this decision before the election, is like the next 4 years, I'm just going to put my head down and build my own stories.
Totally. I think it's a great thing.
And if I build my own stories, that includes the valuations of companies. It means my conviction about the products that I sell. It means the habits that I practice. You know, our friend Brooke Castillo said something to me that I thought was so insightful, which was, she said that when she is talking about opportunities, to her, she is just spitting facts. So she's so convicted in her mind about an opportunity that they're just factual to her. But she recognizes that she has created those facts internally, meaning if somebody didn't have the same conviction, those facts would just be noise to her. So it's her internal conviction
I understand
that makes it true.
I understand that.
And I desire that regardless. I want that independent of what is going on in the world. If the whole world is panicking about something, I want to be the freak with his head in the sand who is so convicted and optimistic about what he is doing and enrolls other people into that possibility. Now, I don't do that all the time. I totally get my cues and convictions from other people when I feel uncertain. But that's when I think we do it. When we feel uncertain, we cling to the stories that other people have made for us. When we're confident, we create our own stories and enroll our people into that. I think you do that as a steward of capital.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to do that as the trainer of entrepreneurs. And to some extent, I feel like that is part of our job, our mandate as entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I agree. One of my favorite books of all time is Sapiens. I'm sure you've read Sapiens before. And I think that the one thing you really take away from that book is that what makes human beings so special.
He's a World Economic Forum plant, right? He's trying to manipulate the entire world.
Exactly.
He's trying to get chips in all of our brains so he can control our thoughts.
I've heard. But what I love about Sapiens is that this idea that stories, really what makes human beings so unique from other animals is that we're great storytellers. And so I love it when he says that, hey, literally I hand you a $20 bill, it's a piece of paper, and you and I have this shared story that this piece of paper is worth $20. Why? Because we say it's so. So say very similar to what you're saying about Brooke. And so the reason why we're the most cooperative species is because we can create, like if you and I both agree that this paper is worth $20 and you're willing to sell me this pillow for $20 and we agree that this piece of paper is an exchange, it creates an exponential cooperation that no other animal can do. Mm-hmm. The only trick about stories is, and I think you really brought it out well, Ryan, is like, what stories are you telling? Are you telling stories that are creating fear in people, like fear in people and fear in yourself? Or are you creating stories that empower and create optimism? And there's such a huge difference with that. And so I think if you're encouraging your own stories, you're doing your own stories, it's number one, because that'll be the key to your happiness or your depression. What stories are you, whether it's Joe Dispenza or Tony Robbins? But then ultimately from our government, what stories is our government telling us? It's easier to control people in fear than it is in having people feel really confident.
That's
and
true in marketing. It's true in that's true with any sort of media.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying. I think that, right now on this day, 8 hours after someone's been elected, I think that, the most power that we have right now, to your point, and I think that's what you've done so well, is the one thing you can't control election outcomes. We have no idea what kind of policies we're going to see, but you certainly can control your story. And I do agree with you. Like, even in my post-election hangover, I don't have fear about my company's success. I don't have fear about like navigation of things. I don't fear those things because those are things I control. I'm really good at them. And so long as the rules don't change so much where I can't, transact, which I don't believe will happen. I don't think that there's no reason for that. We're so grounded in capitalism as a culture.
Think about just a few weeks, months, or in my case, a couple of years ago, sitting at your house where there was genuine concern that we may have a contested election with no clear winner and it be caught in the courts, and now we don't know who's in charge. Mm-hmm. That's a concern.
Yeah.
Right? We had concerns over the grid, or there being some natural disaster in the middle of an election and there being discord. And we had a very clear, decisive result within the same night. And I feel like we dodged a bullet.
But some people would tell you if their candidate didn't win, then those machines were unreliable or the process was unreliable.
We were concerned with that, yeah.
They can create stories like that if they choose to. Also, we do know clearly right now that we do have foreign countries that know the power of stories and narratives and controlling their population. And now they realize through social media platforms that they can put a dent and they can add more to the fear factor. And they know that fear creates, like I think Russia was saying, like, the greatest way to make America weaker is to divide it within. Like that is like the best formula we can do. Forget about missile defense, like a weaker America within, because people are fearful. And if you kind of look at what they do, like I don't know if you heard
Well, like,
yesterday.
where are you going? Where are you going?
Well,
with
like
this?
yesterday, there was a bomb. They said there was a bomb threat. Like if you heard the news, it would said there was a bomb threat. Like they were trying to, like some people were trying to avoid people from coming to elections. It turns out that bomb threat was not real. It was Russian. It was going on Russian social feeds. So the point is, we really have to protect what stories not only do we create, but what stories we're bringing into our body. And just know generally, optimism and things you can control will create a better pathway for your own happiness, I guess, at the end of the day. The other ones, maybe some are real. Maybe it's good to be concerned about certain things, but just, it's tricky. It's really tricky when your government, or you think your government or media platforms are telling you things of concern. It's good to know them, but if you internalize them too much, then they can start to manipulate you.
So let's play a game.
Okay.
Let's play the case for optimism game.
Okay.
And let's see how good we can make this.
Okay.
Let's look ahead at the next 5 years.
Okay.
And we have to be the ones that are convincing everyone else
Okay. I love
that
this.
it's about to get real good.
Okay. I love
Now,
it.
why would it be beneficial to believe that it's going to be real good? Well, if you believe that things are about to get real good, you're going to wake up in the morning with a little bit more spring in your step.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I've gone through periods where waking up in the morning was like the hardest part of my day because
yeah.
I so dreaded the day. So
Yeah.
if I believe that my world is going to get better, I'm going to get out of bed with a little bit more energy. And if I'm waking up out of bed with a little bit more energy, I'm probably going to smile a bit more and be kinder to the people around me and probably be better to my customers. And I'm probably going to make more money too, because I'm going to be bullish about opportunities. So
and you're also going to feel safer in your body. When you feel safe in your body, you transmit that to other people too, and they can feel you and they're feeling better. Like it goes.
So there is a tangible benefit to believing that things are about to get real good. So let's make that case. I'm going to start real easy.
Okay.
Then we'll warm up and then we'll make this case as great as it can be.
You're like my therapist for today.
So number one, I have been so encouraged that across the board, and I'm talking from Vice President Harris to the people who have been texting me this morning, that everyone is just ready to move on.
Agreed.
And that there has been already a commitment to a peaceful transfer of power, that the people that I know who didn't get their way are already like, let's move on, let's move forward. A person on my team who absolutely despises the president-elect said, I'm just ready for the country to get back together and for us to move forward. So there is this burning desire for everyone to come together again. I'm going to start there because can you just imagine how refreshing that would have sounded 3 years ago when we were ready for war against anyone who disagreed with us. And now we are ready to move forward no matter who is going to be in the White House. That is, I think, a really good sign of optimism. Can we build off that one?
Yes, I'll try to. I'll try to edit my thoughts. Yes, so we will have divide. We will have. I mean, not divide. Hopefully, we'll have more clarity. Less this thought of someone's going to try to. I think in the next 3 months will be very like matter of fact. I think Wall Street will stay strong. I think businesses are afraid of taxation. I think this creates like a path, and I think from that path of like now there's knowingness and certainty. You will see companies, businesses, Wall Street. I think you'll continue to see an extended rally. I think you'll see investors willing to put out more capital. You might start to see people who've been like nervous. It's funny. I'm selling an apartment building, and the call for offers was today, and I pushed it for another week because I think you are going to see a momentum of like people getting out of this hangover and being more bold and certain. And with that will come like more investment, stronger market.
I can see if there is optimism in the markets, then I can see creativity being unleashed.
Yeah.
I think there has been, especially working with the entrepreneurs that I do who are mostly first-time entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are grinding their way to their first million, is there has been a lot of hesitancy to get back into the game. There has been some nervousness because of inflation. There's been nervousness because of markets being at all-time highs. Is there going to be a recession? And it feels like as soon as you can look forward to something being better, your creativity is unleashed. And of course, when your creativity is unleashed, you end up creating the result, because the result is not outside of you. It is whatever you can create into the marketplace. And so I can, as if there's more capital returning to the markets, I can see a new era of creativity sort of being unleashed among entrepreneurs and investors. And it sounds like you kind of could see that happening based on what's been on the sidelines.
Definitely. I'm launching my first deal this week. My first deal in 2 years.
Your first deal in 2 years
First
this
deal in
week.
2 years. This week I'm launching my
So
first deal.
you're buying again.
For the first time in 2 years, I'm buying.
Wow.
I'm raising money. I haven't done this in a while, so I'm raising money again. I found the first deal that pencils, that makes sense to do. And I've got 2 or 3 deals potentially right behind that. So all of a sudden, I went from zero to where I could be raising almost $50 million in capital in the next 6 months.
Holy Moses.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It is pretty cool.
What let you know that it was like time?
I can this deal pencils where I can create cash, like a 7% cash flow out the gate. I haven't been able to do that for 2 years. Where I can create cash flow because prices settle down just enough.
Yeah.
And a little bit of JP's magic in terms of how the deal went, how we structured the deal. So that's pretty cool.
So you're seeing opportunities as an investor now too to get back into the game as
Prices
a buyer.
are still, I think prices might still have a little more in them, but I feel like prices are down 20 to 40% in commercial real estate. So now, and then as time goes on, there's even like little better angles. So all of a sudden with that little break, if you get a little creative, right, to your point, if you get into creativity, there's opportunities, and there'll continue to be more opportunities.
And that's really good news for your investors who have been knocking on your door forever, looking for the next.
Sent them an email last night saying, "Hey, first deal's coming."
That's fantastic.
It's really fun to be able to do that.
You know who else that's good news for? All of people in real estate who have been hanging on, trying to survive until 25.
Right.
And now there's a leader in the market who is buying at the right price. That means that there's potential for healing to come into the market to buy up some of the assets that haven't performed, turn them around, and get positive momentum in this direction again.
It's like I said, I still think there'll be a little bit of and it depends on your property and where it's located. Certain markets are more saturated than others. But the point is, like, I do think there'll be a clearing, and for some people, it's going to hurt. Like, I'm actually not only buying, but I'm actually selling a property. And I think I told you, I just pushed it a week because I think the election bump might buy me another $1 million or $2 million on my price. By letting the fear go away and the certainty come, I just figured just wait. I'm still about 30 or 40% off the peak of what it was worth. It's a property here in Austin, but it will still be a nice return. Yeah. It'll still be a great return, quite frankly, and great success. So that, I mean, like, even like you look at this, instead of trying to look back and say, gosh, I could have gotten X amount more for it. Like, I bought something 7 years ago, 7 years ago. It went through ups. It's gone through downs, and I can still sell it and make a pretty good risk-adjusted return. We'll call it 18%.
It's fantastic.
17, 18%. What's wrong with that? It might have been 60% or 70%, but now it's 18. And guess what? That's pretty damn good.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good. Well, that was fun. We just made a pretty optimistic case. I mean, we're bringing capital back into the marketplace. I'm seeing people just ready to move forward, creativity being Unleashed. I like this game. So how do you...
There's something else.
Tell me. No,
there's one thing that was different about this selection that I noticed, at least in my community, than I did in the last 8 years, is even amongst... I don't know if this is an Austin thing or our community or just in general, I found that people in at least my community were more willing to discuss with less anger. I know that's not everywhere.
Yes, I agree.
I had a dinner party last night. The room was split last night, and it was totally fine.
Yeah.
And there was one guy from New York who said, gosh, we can't really talk like this in New York. But I found that as much as people are passionate about their positions, some people, not all, were really able to like let go. Maybe it's been, I know for me, quite frankly, it's just been after 8 years of heated elections and having, as we all know from my podcast, you know, my wife and I have different political affiliations. Like, I think we've learned to navigate this, at least some of us, not everybody. But like, I think you said something earlier. It's like we can just move on. Like, it's easier to move on. It's like, okay, it's just politics, but there's something bigger in us than just politics. And I think maybe after 8 years of muscling through this, call it fatigue, call it exhaustion, or maybe call it some skill set that maybe we do navigate better. We learn, you know, to believe and be passionate, but also not to get so attached. Which I know I have. It's been my journey, at least.
There was a book published in 2009 called Pendulum. It was it's a terrible read, but it had one idea that was just like singed into my brain, and I can't ever unsee it after this. So the book argued that we go through cycles as a society of being me focused and we focused.
Interesting.
And at the extremes, the me focus is like hero worship and the idea that this person has it figured out and I don't, and that person's perfect and I'm flawed. It's very individualistic. And on the we side, it is all about groupthink. We're good, they're bad. We are this, they are that. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys, etc. And they argued that throughout history, it goes through these 80-year swings. And I always am skeptical when people make these, like, you can go back and trace these cycles. I'm like, bullshit, right. Okay? Like, you're just doing hindsight math. But they argued that the peak of the we cycle of the good guys versus bad guys would be 2023. And then after that, it would be falling more towards more of a balance and individualistic thinking, where it wouldn't be like, oh, you're a Democrat, they're a Republican, I'm a this. It's like, oh, you reached these conclusions. Interesting. You're an individual. Tell me how you reach these conclusions.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm describing. What you're describing is exactly
that's what made me think of it.
That's been more my experience. I mean, it was almost like I could have looked at a person 6 years ago and told you after 2 minutes of talking to them who they were going to vote for, or which party, the red team or the blue team. And this was a little different. This was more nuanced. I actually think my friends were really evenly, almost split 50-50. And I've got like a lot of really smart, intelligent friends. And I just like, it made me more curious, probably because I'm more curious, more the individualistic. Like, I was genuinely curious to what they had to say. And I was also genuinely curious because it's like, I don't agree with you, but I'm really curious. How'd you get to this point of thinking about it this way? And it brings up a lot of good conversations and a lot of good thoughts if you're willing to let go of having to be right.
Yes.
And if you're willing to let go of having your opinion being right, then it's like kind of there's more space for curiosity. And if you're not threatened, if you feel like a strong enough human being where you're like, you know what, I don't have to be right, and I can still be open, and I can still have my opinion at the end of the day. But wouldn't it be more interesting if, like, I heard other people's opinions and was open? I could come to the same conclusion, or maybe I'll come to a different conclusion. But like, that takes some courage to do that.
I don't think you can properly persuade another person unless you fully understand them. And I mean fully understand them.
I think that's true.
Because in reality, most of us reach our conclusions emotionally and justify them logically.
Right.
And we argue with logic.
Right.
Well, that is not persuasive. So I have to emotionally understand how you arrived at the conclusions that you did in order to be on your team. And now you might be open to seeing how I arrived at a different conclusion. And now we can have a real discussion about where we go from here. But I think that when we're simply arguing facts, we're not persuasive because that's not how we got to our conclusions in the first place. Right. I think we've finally understood that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
And there's now this wide variety of how people have gotten to their conclusions. It's not so black and white anymore. And now I think I hope that the next 4 years is filled with a lot more empathy for how other people got to the conclusions and situations that they're in.
Amen, brother.
All right, JP, let's make some bold, optimistic predictions for what we think could happen over the next 4 to 5 years. I'll start.
Okay.
One of my bold predictions could see Ethereum at 6,000.
I hope so.
Over the next 4 years.
One of my bold predictions is that the next time we sit down at the next election, there'll be 4 new companies you've never heard of that are the size of Amazon.
Over $1 trillion valuation that you've never heard of before?
When I say you've never heard of, they're small companies now. I think that that the industry of AI is going to move much faster. I think if anyone who thinks that the internet had a speed, I think the speed's much faster, as we saw from ChatGPT. I think there could be another 4 or 5 companies that birth like a ChatGPT that are doing one sector that could become that big, and like literally take over industries that fast.
That's
bold.
A really interesting thought.
I'm watching the speed of things right now, and I've never seen the speed of industry is changing so fast.
I'm going to say that for the first time in 50 years, obesity rates over the next 4 years go down. I think with the adoption of GLP-1 and other weight loss drugs, that we're going to see obesity rates drop for the first time in however many years it's been.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Trump and Kennedy will take credit for it, but it's mostly going to be Eli Lilly and the drug companies.
Okay, maybe they've done something good. We'll see. I would say in 4 years from now, right when we're sitting here, there will not be a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It will have resolved. I don't know what the resolution will be, but I feel very confident that both the Middle East conflict and Russia-Ukraine will come to some form. We won't be talking about that as a conflict the way we think of it today.
I'm going to go, I'll add, I think that we may see an adoption of private currencies over the next 4 to 5 years. I think as PayPal, Visa, as they adopt crypto, as Square adopts crypto and makes it more common for people to transact, I think you might see companies, cities start to release their own currencies, and that will play a very important part into how our economy functions over the next 5 years.
That's cool. I'm sure that we will have self-driving cars, and there'll be 20% of what's on the road will be. People are freaked out by it. It's coming, and it makes so much sense. I think the minute you drive in a self-driving car and you take your hands off the steering wheel and your brain can relax and not drive, which I've had now a taste of several times, you just don't want to go back.
Well, I mean, even here in Austin, you've seen these Waymo cars around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is Uber with no driver.
We don't need drivers. And it's better for humanity. It's better for your soul. You don't need to drive unless you want to drive on a racetrack, which I fully appreciate.
Okay. I'll say that in 4 to 5 years, we're going to have, I've been hoping for this for a decade, but we're going to have some sort of option to live in community, whether it is a change in the way that we do HOAs, or it is people buying land and just building a community. I don't know, but there's going to be some option for us to live in more intentional community, which I think we are just starved for as a society right now. I think it's the cause for most of our problems, the source of most of our unhappiness, and we're finally going to say, enough keeping up with the Joneses. I'll live in this house over here. You live over here, and we're going to build community somehow together. I don't know how, but somehow.
I know how we can do it. We can say that for a separate episode.
Ooh, you had my attention.
I do have some ideas for that. I'm going to make a bold prediction, regardless of government policy, that we will make bold steps forward on the environment and the climate. And it's going to come from private enterprise.
I hope you're right.
That actually we will manage to, whether it's greenhouse gases and some of these things, like as much power as government has, I really believe in the power of private enterprise and also the power of profit. I think we're already seeing more and more how profitable green energy can be. And I think it'll continue on. Like, it's not quite there yet. And I think everyone's waiting, but I think you're seeing more and more people I'm seeing it as an investor, models that are starting to actually make sense, that are financially have a lot of abundance and a lot of upside in them. And I think that'll continue regardless of what the government argues about.
Well, the next 4 years sound great.
Not bad,
huh? Well, JP, no matter what happens, I'm on Team JP. I know you're on Team Ryan.
I'm always on Team Ryan.
I don't care what happens in the economy. I think part of the division that we have felt for the last several years is this perception that people aren't going to have our back, or what happens if the world turns against me, or if this person is against me. And I have realized through the last 8 years, going through some really high highs and some really low lows, that you're only really as blessed as you feel connected to other people. You know, and you are one of those people in my life. And so even if there's civil war and we're torn apart, I'm on Team JP. I know you're on Team Ryan.
I am. There's one more piece, though. If we don't want a civil war, don't tell that as a story.
Amen.
Amen. Change your story. And remember, at any moment, no matter who you're with, you can always go from conflict to consensus by going past the stated issues and going right to vision. So for instance, and I've been doing a lot of this, no matter what your map is or your political leanings, if you love being in this country and you love being in America, which I do because I get to hang out with you, we can talk shit and not worry about censoring our podcast. And so Consensus is I am so grateful to be an American no matter what. And I see you, Ryan, no matter what your policies are, not only as my friend, but I see you as my fellow American. And I'm just so grateful that we get to live this experiment together.
Beautiful. Great to see you, buddy.
Great to see you.
To the next 4 years.
Next 4 years.
Deuces.
Deuces.
If you enjoyed this conversation with JP, make sure you subscribe to his podcast. You can find it by searching for Investing on Purpose. And if you enjoyed today's episode here on capitalism.com, thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.